Hey Tommy, where's that Autobahn review? Is that Autobahn review coming? Yes, it is coming. But my Autobahn t-shirt is dirty. And why the hell would I review Autobahn without the t-shirt? Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I'm talking about Goldie's Timeless. Alright then, so the reason I'm tackling this now, besides the fact that my Autobahn t-shirt is dirty, is because Goldie has a new album called The Journeyman coming out really soon, less than 2 weeks actually. I've been hoping to cover this guy's first 2 albums before I get into that one, because I have quite a fair bit to say on them. Well, I actually probably have more to say about his second album, Saturn's Return, but I'll save a separate video for that. You might see that at some point in between some of these Kraftwerk reviews. So then, let's talk about drum and bass music. Now, I'd be lying if I said this was exactly my favorite genre in the world or can consider myself an expert on it. Not that anyone should call me an expert on anything, but whatever. This guy is one of the biggest names in that old-school jungle movement that eventually grew into drum and bass. There are other names as I associate with this movement, like 4Hero and a guy called Gerald, and maybe The Prodigy. I don't think they actually count, but whatever. But the one name that always comes to mind first whenever I think of the name drum and bass has always been Goldie. Not even Pendulum, who I arguably listen to more. It's just Goldie has basically been my main perception of this genre as a whole and what it's all about. This album here, Timeless, I believe was my first experience in this genre. I get first heard it like freshman year of high school, or some really early point like that. And from what I've heard, this is widely considered to be basically the seminal drum and bass album, the essential one that everyone has to hear. And I will have to admit, it is undoubtedly one of the best examples I've heard in this genre to date, even ignoring its nostalgia. Now there is one small problem with my experience though, like there are 2 versions of this album, one which is a double album with 12 tracks, and one cut down to a single album with 8 tracks, and I'm used to the latter. iTunes and Spotify currently have the former up there though, although with 2 bonus tracks, which are just remixes I didn't really bother myself with, but whatever. So the 4 missing tracks that weren't on my version being This Is a Bad, Jaw the Seventh Seal, Adrift, and Still Life. I only heard for the first time fairly recently, so I'll do my best to discuss this album, which, to be perfectly honest, I don't have a ton to say about in detail. Or maybe this is going to be one of those reviews where I think I don't have much of anything to say, but I actually do, because I have a hard time putting into words why Timeless works as well as it does. It's almost indescribable. All these manic, fast-paced beats going up against smooth and emotional sounds makes for a highly pleasant, accessible experience. If you thought this genre was super abrasive and hard to get into, I think you might want to check this album out. Or if you have no previous experience in drum and bass, this would be a good place to start as well. Regardless, I believe it's worth at least one listen. On the 1-disc version I'm used to, there's not a single remotely bad track. The opener entitled track, Timeless, stretches on for 21 minutes, and somehow, even as a little kid, I never at any point got bored by it or felt it went on too long. Hell, it often felt like half that length. It's supposedly a multi-part suite with 3 sections called Inner City Life, Pressure, and Pure. And while the sections are somewhat noticeable, they blend together really well, and it does all just feel like minor side tracks on the same song. Plus the sample for Ja comes in before the halfway mark and doesn't actually come back after being repeated like once. And there are other side tracks he could have called attention to after that if he wanted to, like Inner City Life comes back at the end, but whatever. Point is, this is a ridiculously great track. The rest don't hit quite the same heights as that first one, but mainly because they don't have quite the ambitious goal of keeping your attention for 21 minutes. Some of these tracks do get really long though. Hell, aside from Angel, which goes on for a little under 5 minutes, everything else is 6 minutes or longer, including on the standard 2-disc edition. It may sound like a lot, and in the case of the standard edition, it still kind of is, but all of these songs do a perfectly good job of keeping your attention throughout the entire track. I don't have a lot of detailed descriptions of the other tracks. You got stuff like the aggressive and hard-hitting Saint Angel, the soulful, emotional, and even kind of jazzy State of Mind, which has the common courtesy to slow down the tempo a bit. Didn't really even have to either, but it is all the more effective for doing so. Just letting the atmosphere and Diane Charlemagne's vocals carry the track. Love this one. Anyway, there's the spacey 12-minute epic Sea of Tears, which, like Timeless, does a great job of keeping my attention the whole time. There's the somewhat distant vocal track Angel. There's the kinda catchy and also quite spacey and engaging Sensual. And there's Chemistry, which is named after his then-girlfriend, DJ Chemistry, who was unfortunately killed in a car accident a few years later. While the track itself isn't a huge standout sonically, it is just as enjoyable as the rest of them. Still got that kind of cinematic vibe to it. I like it. And the closer, You and Me, is another emotional and even pretty haunting vocal track. Closing the album out on a high note. The album just all comes together to create a very immersive and engaging atmosphere. All fantastic stuff. By the way, as a side note, I feel like I should also mention Rob Playford, who produced this album. Like, supposedly Goldie came up with the ideas and Playford actually carried them out. I don't know exactly, but he was important to the creation of this album and deserves a name drop, but I digress. Now, the standard 2-disc edition adds a couple more tracks, and also replaces Sensual with a slightly shorter VIP mix called A Sense of Rage, which adds some interesting elements, but isn't as good in my opinion. So, okay. Out of the 4 exclusive tracks, I think the 10-minute Still Life is probably my personal favorite. This is kind of like another Sea of Tears, maybe not as emotional. There's a lot of 808 beats in here, which is kind of cool, as it sets it apart from the crowd. And Adrift is basically just an entirely ambient vocal track, which makes for some nice variety. The other 2 aren't huge standouts to me personally. Ja the 7th Seal has some cool creepy sections in it. Yeah, that one's alright. But my least favorite is probably This Is a Bad. If only because the sample that says the title was used again in a track on his Saturn's Return album called Fury the Origin, and I personally prefer that track. But that's just me. And I think that's about all I have to say on the album itself. I guess if there's any criticism I might have, it's that it doesn't exactly live up to its title anymore. Like, I will admit though, while the majority of drum and bass I know is of this older variety, even when I compare it to something like Pendulum's Hold Your Color, you can tell there's a very different sound and philosophy going into that. There's nothing on Timeless that even remotely comes close sonically to something like Slam or Fasten Your Seatbelts. Although stuff like Plastic World isn't a far cry from this sound either. But all that aside, Timeless may not be a perfect album. It's not the kind of thing I could just listen to forever. I'd personally want something with a bit more variety. But even here, I'm just kind of nitpicking and trying to justify why it didn't make my personal all-time favorites list. This is still a must-listen album. It's one of those albums that you should listen to for historical significance, but still has a lot of regular enjoyment to be found. If you like the kind of drum and bass that's a lot more bombastic and noisy, you might not enjoy this as much given that it is significantly more chill, but I still recommend it to everyone, and it's a great album to be sure. I'm overall feeling an 8.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.